This is another in a series of videos describing an interpretation that relates the film Mulholland Drive to David Lynch's personal devotion to meditation, as well as his life's work with what may be described as an abstract expressionistic artist. His expressionistic artwork could be imagined reflecting his own inner world and philosophical views. Lynch spends a great deal of time and energy advocating for transcendental meditation, and the David Lynch Foundation exists solely to promote the practice, which he believes can offer great benefits. He describes it as a technique or pathway to transcend and attain the state of pure bliss. His art and meditative practice together are the primary sources underlying the interpretive perspective of this video series. On a separate note, I want to mention that I have had a lot of difficulty working around the copyright policies which have been blocking most of the videos I've uploaded so far. I am attempting to make edits to remove the offending materials and will repost them. As a brief overview, this interpretation perceives the standard solutions which attempt to solve the physical narrative story as outer surface layers or levels which are never fully resolved in the film. Typically, these solutions will attempt to interpolate and create physical events never clearly contained on screen. And these are not wrong at all, and some viewers will be satisfied to remain on the surface, which is in itself an integral part of this interpretation, an interpretation that can be perceived as layers that can be transcended through, leading to a more complete and unified experience. I like to review in each video some concepts of two basic principles of Eastern philosophy that can help to understand this interpretive perspective. The first is, many people typically exist in a perpetual cycle of desire leading to suffering, in which we are never permanently satisfied and fail to become enlightened. The second is what is called Maya, or the veil of Maya, a conceptual view that the physical world is impermanent and is an illusion compared to the spiritual reality of the inner being within. This is a very incomplete explanation, as only intended to provide a brief base from which to understand the interpretation for those who may be unaware of the concepts. There is information available online that can provide a deeper understanding of these subjects. It also can help to imagine all of the characters as individual, non-physical mental aspects residing within an entirely non-physical mental landscape deep within the subconscious mind. The characters being abstract representations of certain mental processes taking place within the unenlightened mind of an unseen universal character, perhaps represented by Sylvia North, whose life story is the subject of the film being made within Mulholland Drive. It may also help to understand how some of the symbolic elements may be perceived and understood. We often will use stereotypes and preconceptions to assume certain things. I am aware many believe the Castiglione brothers are mafia or some other organization bankrolling a film. But all we are really explicitly shown in Mulholland Drive is that they are demanding characters, appear menacing, powerful, and are never fully satisfied. And now this could also artistically and symbolically describe the powerful force that desire uses to push and deceive us within our mind to go in a certain direction. Assigning our preconceptions to such elements presented in the film might correspond to illusions, since they do not exist within the film, but are created in the viewer's own mind, perhaps relating to the Maya in Eastern philosophical teachings. Once beginning to perceive a connective symbolic film language, it becomes possible to go deeper and discover artistic abstractions that become a rich allegory connected to these Buddhist and Eastern philosophical teachings that relate to meditation and can eventually reveal an artistic portrayal of what might be described as a transcending experience. Like with the previous clues in this series, this presentation will likely wander into scenes which may go beyond the clue itself because the film can become so intensely interconnected. So let's go on to clue number 4. An accident is a terrible event. Notice the location of the accident. It's hard to know where to start. The location is Mulholland Drive, an exclusive address on the mountains up above Hollywood, a symbol of material success, which is home to many of Hollywood's rich and famous. In this interpretation, Laura Herring's characters are the symbolic representation of physical desire within the mind. We, as the viewer, have been following the limo, carrying the symbol of desire, following desire, and that leads to a crash or suffering. But the desire lives on and wanders down to LA to sneak into Aunt Ruth's apartment at Havenhurst, a symbolic representation of some deeper part of the mind. Note how the windows and doors can appear as a face covered by vines, artistically suggesting neurons that connect different parts or characters within the mind. In this interpretation, there is the upper or outer mind on the surface, relating to the physical material world that can be unaware of the deeper non-physical inner world within. The material world would relate to the outer surface and things like North, Canada, and upper floor, or a mountain can suggest this upper level surface, while the lower world, in this case Southern California or Los Angeles, could relate to the lower inner mind of our inner world reality. There is a car crash accident on Mulholland Drive when Laura Herring's character is riding in the limo and told at gunpoint to get out. This crash is caused by people driving carelessly and recklessly on the winding road, as well as the driver perhaps having stopped and turned around, no longer paying attention. The racing cars are having fun and happy, seemingly unaware and ignorant to the dangers and consequences that will lead to suffering and death. When considered along the lines of the theme I am suggesting relating to meditation, this might be described as mindlessness. Within the frames of the film, the cars seem to be going in the same direction as the limo, that is, from screen right to screen left, yet they crash head-on, symbolically, in the wrong direction with regards to cinematic convention. This can be a way to indicate that something is wrong and can have an element of symbolism, not going right. The viewer may not even be aware. A white light, presumably a street light, is visible looking forward through the front windshield. The light can be a symbol of enlightenment that is in sight but not reached or attained and remains ahead. The driver points a gun and instructs Laura Herring's character to get out just before the headlights of the racing cars illuminate Laura's face, and the white car crashes into the limo as the red car speeds on past, uncaring, and the smoke rises to envelop the crash site. The color red on the red car that speeds by can suggest the more negative type of emotions like lust, anger, and danger, and is associated with Camilla, the symbol of physical desire. The white car could symbolize innocence and virginity in the sense of not knowing or being unaware in the theme of this interpretation. The fire and smoke arising from the wreck suggest the phrase where there's smoke, there's fire, with fire being associated with negativity, and the resulting enveloping smoke a symbol that connotes unclear vision and is used throughout the film. Laura descends into the world below and openly sneaks into absent-minded Aunt Ruth's apartment and as she is departing, presumably for Canada, a northern or upper direction symbolically related to the outer surface of the mind, as is further symbolized by the unseen Sylvia North. Imagining Laura's character as a symbol of physical desire, having been involved in one terrible accident, she is now floating aimlessly above the lights to wander down again into the open mind. And yes, the open mind can take on a different meaning from what we typically associate it with, like being willing to listen. Recall that the term is spoken by Agent Robert Smith at Adam's meeting with the Castiglione brothers.
We are asking you to keep an open mind.
And here too, open mind can mean an unguarded and unaware state of mind that will allow the force of desire to take control. Laura arrives at Havenhurst, a symbolic representation of the mind, but the gate is locked, not open, and Laura falls asleep, but later is able to sneak in as the gate has become opened. Another way to interpret the term an open mind, unlocked and unsecure from intrusion and bad elements like desire. Now this image of Laura as she is sleeping outside the gate at Havenhurst that prominently includes a sprinkler head and electrical conduit connected to the electric control junction box, all visually linked to her head, can be artistically symbolic of repeating cycles within the mind, implied by a sprinkler system that cycles on and off, with the piping and wire conduit perhaps again suggesting neurons and physical electrical impulses within the brain that controls and directs the actions. Mulholland Drive is rich with such symbolic compositions that can add extra depth when exploring the film. Mulholland Drive in the real world is a physical symbol of worldly success and can be perceived as a metaphor for material ambition, a Mulholland Drive or ambition. The word drive being an element of control. Who is driving your buggy? Who is directing the direction of your life? Do you let your negative, self-centered desires and emotions drive and control you, or do you learn to control them? It is interesting to consider that the road is named after William Mulholland, who forcibly brought water from the fertile Owens Valley to Los Angeles using deceitful tactics which destroyed the farms in Owens Valley, turning the area into a desert. Mulholland's career ended when he declared the St. Francis Dam safe, only to have it collapse within hours of his personal inspection, claiming over 400 lives, and was called the worst man-made disaster of the 20th century. He took full responsibility, recognizing his own failure. William Mulholland's life may be a metaphor for the concept of self-centered desire and ignorance leading to suffering. His self-centered desire to underhandedly obtain water from Owens Valley damaged many people and destroyed the rich farming lands, and his ignorance of the true inner deteriorated condition of the St. Francis Dam led to great destruction and loss of life. These seem wonderful connections that can relate to the Eastern philosophical concepts this interpretation is exploring, of desire and ignorance leading to suffering. Later in the film, Diane is driven to Mulholland Drive and experiences an emotional crash or wreck derived from following a desire. She is told by Camilla's call that the limo is outside her house and to go to 6980 Mulholland Drive. In the real world, there is no such address number, and the filming location of Adam's house is elsewhere. Normally, this might not be so significant, but in this film it can suggest the illusion and unreality that life on the surface of the mind represents when contrasted with the inner spiritual world of our inner existence. This time, with Diane in the limo, there is no street light visible through the windshield as the driver instructs her to get out of the car. This might suggest being on the same road or direction, but in a slightly different place. And that reminds me of the montage at the end of the film when Rita and Betty's faces are superimposed over the spinning city, and if you notice that it spins and then it stops in a slightly different place. But let me get back to this. When thinking back to the first case, when Laura gets out of the limo, it may suggest the possibility of getting closer to enlightenment when the streetlight is visible. But in the second case with Diane, nothing was learned. The signs are not recognized, and the cycle of desire leading to suffering has continued. No enlightenment in sight. A failure to evolve to a higher level of understanding and consciousness. Each cycle is different, but the same. Suggested when Dan at Winky's describes his two dreams that are the same. Again, when back of head man in the chain call simply says same, reinforcing a repetitive cycle. And again, when Mr. Darby says, what was it last time, before instructing Espresso Man to try the next one. Ray says, he's not going to like it, and Darby replies, we'll see. So, you see the sort of the cyclical nature being presented. This interpretation connects such scenes together to artistically reinforce the concept that something bad is happening over and over, as Luis Bonner informs Coco. These are all suggestive of something very negative repeating constantly in a cycle, and can nicely relate to the cycle of desire and suffering as described in Eastern philosophy, evolving from David Lynch's personal devotion to meditation. Artistically presenting the film as an abstraction that is confusing and seems incomplete when remaining on the outer levels of the physical world narrative story, and failing to recognize the symbolic non-physical elements that can provide a path to transcend into a more complete and interconnected inner symbolic understanding. Now also, as to the location, we see Camilla leading Diane up the path as Diane gets out of the limo, an image that can suggest the phrase, led up the garden path, a phrase that means being misled and deceived. Notice how the music is the same as when Betty is arriving at Paramount Studios, as well as when she is having sex with Rita at Aunt Ruth's. And also in the collage, after Diane seemingly commits suicide, and Rita and Betty are superimposed over the lights of L.A. This can be a device to connect these scenes as having a common thread, which I interpret as being deceived by desire. And the wonderful music takes on slightly different feelings in each scene, but when considered ultimately with this theme of desire and suffering, becomes rather sad and poignant. And the dinner party is on Mulholland Drive. And this is where Diane has been led by Camilla up the garden path, Diane following her desire, only to come crashing down emotionally and wanting to end or destroy, push out that which she believes is causing her suffering. An accident can also refer to the crashing sound heard as Adam and Camilla kiss, and Diane turns her head, and the crash sound bleeds into Diane turning her head at Winky's diner. At Winky's, Diane appears negatively angry now at the waitress for dropping the dishes. The crash coincides with Diane's emotional records as she sees Camilla and Adam kiss. The sound of the crash bleeding into Diane at the diner links the two scenes as Diane's suffering from which she seeks an escape. This scene can also be imagined as an accident, an unfortunate injury which the Diane character is experiencing. I want to mention here that Adam only says, Camilla and I are going to be.
Are going to be.
He does not get out the word married before they kiss. This, too, can be interpreted to indicate that the actions chosen in the mind have resulted in what will be. What will be in this inner mental landscape, in this case, choosing the material physical world over the inner spiritual well-being. Failure to recognize the right path leading to a more fulfilling inner life of inner peace, contentment, bliss, and happiness. Adam focuses on the material things. I got the pool, and she got the pool boy. I wanted to buy that judge a Rolls Royce. Material over non-material. He strikes back at his wife by attacking her material possessions. Adam is shown ultimately to be uncaring, self-centered, and obnoxious, having allowed something else to take control and take over the direction. He seems oblivious to Diane's suffering, sequentially illustrating a part of the mind making choices leading to suffering, the mind failing to evolve to a higher state and remaining in a negative, self-centered material existence. I like to consider the words actors, action, character, direction, and parts as all words that can have multiple meanings and used to reinforce the concept of this point of view. For example, character in a film about the inner character or personality of the mind. It can become possible to perceive many interwoven events when viewing the film from this symbolic allegorical perspective, and there is so much more to be explored. This series will next delve into clue number 5, who gives a key and why?